That's former President Trump inside a New York City courthouse where he is a defendant in a civil fraud case. The camera was briefly allowed inside, and it caught Mr. Trump locked in a stare down with the judge, who's already ruled that Trump fraudulently inflated the value of his assets. As Les Trent reports, what happens in this case could decide whether Mr. Trump retains control over his business empire.
It's a staring contest in open court. The former president scowling as he locks eyes on Justice Arthur Engoron, who seems unfazed by Trump's glare. He removes his glasses and mugs for the camera. On the other side of the courtroom, 4 rows behind Trump, another stare down as Trump's arch foe, New York State's Attorney General Letitia James, fixes her gaze on him.
Hang on, we have some pictures from inside court.
This is unusual.
The extraordinary scene caught the news networks by surprise. Cameras are not usually allowed inside courtrooms in New York.
We're seeing something that we frankly did not expect. There's a camera in that courtroom.
But not for long. The cameras were ordered out before opening statements began.
Hey guys, welcome back. Dr. John is here, so this has just happened, guys. A coordinated campaign to manipulate the judiciary has been exposed in real time inside federal courtrooms across the country, and the resulting explosion has left legal observers gasping. Picture the scene. A federal judge, robed and seated behind a towering mahogany bench, has just issued a ruling. Not a radical ruling, not some out-of-left-field judicial activism fever dream, but a straightforward application of statutory law and constitutional principle. The kind of ruling that happens thousands of times a year in this country without anyone outside the legal community batting an eye.
We're following breaking news out of New York tonight, where a judge has ordered massive penalties for former President Donald Trump and his organization.
The civil fraud case has also led to a ban on doing business in the Big Apple. Christian Benavidez reports from the New York courthouse.
A New York judge has ordered former President Donald Trump and his co-defendants to pay more than $350 million. The ruling also bars Trump from running any company in New York for 3 years. Judge Arthur Engoron released a decision 4 months after finding Trump had committed fraud by inflating his assets and net worth, all to get better terms on loans and insurance. New York Attorney General Letitia James had argued the former president should be banned from doing business in New York.
We have produced evidence about the scope, the scale, the depth, the breadth of the illegality, the fraud that impersonally enriched Donald Trump and his family.
But this particular ruling blocks something the administration desperately wants, and within hours, the machinery of intimidation roars to life. Not days, not weeks, hours. As if someone flipped a switch and activated a network that was already pre-positioned, already locked and loaded, just waiting for the trigger. The attacks that follow aren't the garden variety political criticism that every administration lobs at unfavorable rulings since the dawn of the Republic. These are different. These are nuclear. They are designed not to persuade or to critique legal reasoning, but to annihilate, to crush the spirit, to make an example of a human being who had the audacity to apply the law impartially. The language deployed against this judge is apocalyptic, evil, corrupt, an enemy of the people.
It's a ridiculous award. This is a fine of $355 million for doing a perfect job, for having paid back a loan with no defaults, with no problems. If I weren't running, none of this stuff would have ever happened. None of these lawsuits would have ever happened. Nothing would. I would have had a nice life. These are corrupt people. These are people that shouldn't be allowed to do the things they do. And they're using this as weaponization against a political opponent who's up a lot in the polls.
The demands aren't for appeal or for legislative remedy. The demands are for immediate removal, for the public destruction of a career built over decades of service to the law. And the faces behind these attacks? They aren't anonymous internet trolls. They are the most powerful allies of the former president, individuals with net worths that exceed the GDP of small nations, individuals with social media platforms that reach more people than the nightly news broadcasts of every major network combined.
President Trump's legal team has just filed a motion asking Judge Arthur Engoron to recuse himself from Trump's civil fraud case. NBC's Tom Winters is following this for us. So, Tom, what are their grounds?
Right. So they're specifically citing a series of reports done by our colleagues at NBC New York, Melissa Russo and Jonathan Dienst. And this stems from an interview they did with Adam Bailey, who's not a party to this case. He is an attorney in New York. He once had his license suspended. Basically, what happened is over the course of 2 interviews, Bailey said that he reached out to the judge in this case, Judge Engoron, asking him, suggesting to him potentially how this case should proceed. And I want to read the quote so that we can get it right. I wanted him to know what I think and why. I really wanted him to get it right.
When these people speak, millions hear. When they point a finger and scream evil, a digital mob assembles with terrifying speed. The judge suddenly finds their phone ringing off the hook, their email inbox overflowing with vitriol, their family's sense of safety evaporating overnight. Federal marshals get involved. Security details get assigned. A jurist who dedicated their life to interpreting the law now needs protection for simply doing their job. This is not an exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. This is the state of the American judiciary in the midst of a full-blown intimidation crisis. And it is happening right now while most people scroll past the headlines without understanding the tectonic shift occurring beneath their feet. The courtroom didn't just erupt in chaos because of a single ruling. It erupted because the mask has slipped entirely, revealing a coordinated strategy to break the judicial branch by targeting the human beings who serve within it. Standing at the podium in the White House briefing room, the press secretary steps forward and delivers a statement that feels like it was crafted in some parallel universe where words have lost all meaning. With a straight face and the seal of the presidency looming behind her, she tells the assembled press corps that the real constitutional crisis isn't the billionaire calling a sitting federal judge evil to a global audience. It isn't the campaign of harassment that has made security details necessary for public servants. The real crisis, according to this official White House position, is the judges themselves. They are the ones misusing their authority. They are the ones causing the breakdown. The mental contortion required to make this argument is so extreme that you can practically hear the vertebrae of logic snapping. It's the rhetorical equivalent of setting a building on fire and then blaming the fire department for spraying water on the flames. This isn't just spin. This is the executive branch of the United States government officially blessing an intimidation campaign against the judicial branch. It's one branch of government giving a thumbs up to the destruction of another branch's independence. If you're keeping score at home, that's a violation of the basic operating manual of constitutional democracy, and yet it's being delivered with the casual tone of someone reading off lunch options. Meanwhile, in a parallel legal universe that somehow intersects with all of this chaos, a battle of extraordinary consequences unfolding in New York. The state's attorney general is mounting a ferocious counteroffensive against a volley of subpoenas launched by prosecutors aligned with the former president. Her argument is both simple and devastating. These prosecutors, she contends, were never properly vested with the authority they claim to wield. Their appointments were defective, their legal standing a fiction. Therefore, the subpoenas they've issued, the demands for documents and testimony are legally void. It's a jurisdictional gut punch delivered with surgical precision. If she's right, an entire edifice of investigative pressure collapses under the weight of its own procedural illegitimacy. So here we are, simultaneously witnessing a 3-ring circus, where in one ring the judiciary is being pummeled by orchestrated attacks designed to make judges fear for their lives and careers. In another ring, the executive branch is pointing fingers at the judiciary and screaming crisis to cover its own assault. And in a third ring, state officials are telling federal prosecutors that their entire operation is built on a foundation of sand. It's a constitutional demolition derby, and the wreckage is piling up faster than anyone can clean it up. The thing about intimidation is that it works best when the public doesn't recognize it for what it is. For a long time, the criticism of judges by political figures followed a loose but generally respected set of boundaries. You could say a judge was wrong. You could say their reasoning was flawed. You could appeal their decisions and advocate for different judicial philosophies. What you didn't do, what you absolutely did not do if you respected the system, was target individual judges with personal destruction campaigns. You didn't use your platform to direct a mob toward a specific human being. You didn't question their fundamental right to serve because you disliked an outcome. Those boundaries, once guarded by professional norms and basic decency, have been obliterated, and the speed of their obliteration is breathtaking. Legal experts who have spent entire careers studying the fragility of democratic institutions are not mincing words. They're using language that would have seemed alarmist just a few years ago, but now feels clinically accurate. They're warning that these attacks pose serious, potentially irreversible risks to the constitutional framework. The judiciary, they remind us, is the branch that has neither the power of the purse nor the power of the sword. Its only power is its legitimacy, the collective belief that when a judge speaks, they speak for the law, not for a political faction, not for a billionaire, not for a mob. Strip away that legitimacy, convince enough people that judges are just political actors in robes who can be pressured and bullied like any other politician, and you have effectively neutered the only institution capable of checking executive overreach. The sword remains, the purse remains, but the law becomes a paper tiger, roaring on parchment but toothless in reality. The billionaire at the center of this storm, the one whose platform has become a launchpad for judicial intimidation, operates with a level of reach that is historically unprecedented. Hundreds of millions of followers, a global audience hanging on every post, and an algorithm that amplifies outrage over reason. When he types the word evil and attaches it to a sitting federal judge who just ruled against his political ally, he is not merely expressing an opinion, he is launching a guided missile. The impact is immediate and measurable. The judge's name trends, the threats pour in, the security apparatus scrambles, and every other judge in the country, every district court judge, every appellate judge, every magistrate, watches this unfold and absorbs the silent, chilling message, rule against us, and this is what awaits you. Your reputation will be shredded. Your safety will be compromised. Your life's work will be reduced to a hashtag followed by the word evil. The White House amplification of this message completes the pincer movement. When the press secretary stands at the podium and accuses the judiciary of causing a constitutional crisis, she is providing official cover for the mob. She is translating the billionaire's raw attack into the language of governmental authority. This is no longer just some rich guy sounding off online. This is now the position of the executive branch of the United States government. The judiciary, by doing its constitutional duty, is the problem. The judges who rule impartially are the threat. This inversion of reality is so complete that it feels like walking through a funhouse mirror where every reflection is a lie. The New York Attorney General's challenge to the subpoenas adds yet another layer of constitutional complexity. Her argument is not just procedural nitpicking. It goes to the very heart of what makes an action by the government legitimate. If prosecutors were improperly appointed, if their positions were filled in violation of the laws that govern how federal officers assume their roles, then every action they take is tainted. Every subpoena is suspect. Every indictment could be poisoned fruit from a toxic tree. She's not just defending herself. She's mounting a structural challenge that could reverberate through dozens of cases, potentially invalidating months of investigative work. Whether her argument prevails is a question for courts that are themselves under siege from the very allies of the prosecutors she's fighting. The circularity of this conflict is enough to make your head spin. The consistent pattern that has emerged across multiple cases and multiple jurisdictions is impossible to ignore. Every time a court rules against the administration or its allies, the same sequence plays out like a rehearsed script. First, the decision drops. Second, the outrage machine activates with coordinated messaging across social media, conservative media outlets, and eventually the White House itself. Third, the judge who issued the ruling becomes a personal target, their name dragged through the mud, their motives impugned, their legitimacy questioned. Fourth, the cycle repeats with the next ruling, the next judge, the next wave of attacks. This isn't organic public reaction. This is a deliberate, sustained, strategic campaign to delegitimize the entire federal judiciary by making service on the bench a living nightmare. The public is not oblivious to this. Polling data reveals a growing unease, a creeping sense that something fundamental is breaking. People watch the attacks on judges, see the security concerns, hear the inflammatory rhetoric, and they start to wonder if the courts can really remain independent in such a toxic environment. And that erosion of public trust is not an unfortunate side effect of the attacks. It is the entire point. The goal is not just to win individual cases. The goal is to so thoroughly discredit the judiciary in the eyes of the public that when a court eventually rules against the administration, a significant portion of the population simply shrugs and says, well, of course they did. The courts are just another political battlefield. At that moment, judicial independence ceases to exist as a practical matter. The rulings still get written, the opinions still get published, but their moral and political force evaporates because the foundation of belief that gave them power has been systematically destroyed. The security dimension adds a terrifyingly concrete element to this abstract constitutional crisis. Federal judges are now living with active security concerns that didn't exist at this scale a decade ago. Courthouses are hardening. Protective details are becoming routine. Judges are having difficult conversations with their spouses and children about what to do if someone shows up at their home. This is not the America that any civics textbook describes. This is the kind of thing that happens in countries where the rule of law is breaking down, where political violence lurks just beneath the surface, where wearing a judicial robe makes you a target because someone with power decided you were an enemy. The technological dimension of this crisis is crucial to understand. The attacks on judges are amplified and accelerated by platforms that are specifically designed to maximize engagement. And engagement is maximized by outrage. The algorithm doesn't care about constitutional norms. It doesn't care about judicial independence. It cares about keeping eyeballs glued to screens, and nothing glues eyeballs like a billionaire calling a judge evil. The platform becomes an unwitting accomplice in the destruction of the very democratic institutions that made the platform possible. This is one of the great ironies of the modern era. The tools of communication that were supposed to democratize information and empower the powerless are now being wielded as weapons to concentrate power and intimidate anyone who stands in the way. The coordination of messaging is too precise to be coincidental. Watch a ruling come down, and within hours, sometimes minutes, the identical talking points appear across multiple channels. The same adjectives, the same demands, the same framing. This synchronization points to a level of strategic planning that the casual observer might not appreciate. Someone somewhere is running a rapid response operation designed to shape the narrative around judicial rulings before the ink is even dry. And the narrative is always the same. The judge is corrupt, the system is rigged, the decision is illegitimate. Repeat it enough times across enough platforms, and it starts to feel like truth to people who are not paying close attention. The historical parallels are uncomfortable to contemplate. Democracies that have slid into authoritarianism often follow a recognizable script. First, target the media and paint them as enemies of the people. Second, attack the judiciary and accuse judges of being political operatives. Third, consolidate executive power by marginalizing any institution that can push back. We are not living through a hypothetical case study in a political science textbook. We are living through the live fire exercise, and the judiciary is currently absorbing the heaviest artillery barrage. The framers of the Constitution understood the vulnerability of the judiciary. They gave judges lifetime appointments specifically to insulate them from the political pressures that would inevitably arise when they made unpopular decisions. They understood that the executive would sometimes chafe against judicial constraints. They understood that majorities would sometimes hate the rulings that protected minorities. So they built a fortress around the courts, not with walls and armed guards, but with institutional protections designed to let judges do their jobs without fear of reprisal. What the framers did not anticipate, what they could not possibly have anticipated, was a communication environment where a single individual could instantly mobilize millions against a specific judge. They could not have imagined a world where the executive branch would actively support and amplify that mobilization. The fortress they built is still standing, but the weapons being deployed against it are weapons the framers never dreamed of. The normalization of this behavior is its own kind of poison. Each time an attack happens and the attacker faces no meaningful repercussions, the bar for acceptable behavior drops a little lower. What was shocking 5 years ago is now routine. What is routine now will be mild compared to what comes next if the trend line continues. This is how institutional decay works. It's not a sudden collapse. It's a gradual, almost imperceptible lowering of standards until one day you look around and realize that the boundaries that once constrained behavior have vanished entirely. We are somewhere along that curve, and the slope is steepening. The New York subpoena fight illuminates another front in this war. If the argument that prosecutors were improperly appointed gains traction, the implications cascade outward. It's not just about one case or one set of subpoenas. It's about the legitimacy of an entire prosecutorial apparatus. If the appointments were defective, then every action those prosecutors took is potentially void. Every indictment, every subpoena, every plea deal, every evidentiary ruling flowing from their authority could be challenged. This creates a legal quagmire that could take years to sort out, all while the underlying investigations stall and witnesses scatter and memories fade. It's a procedural nightmare that benefits those who want to run out the clock on accountability. The broader clash between Trump's allies and the judiciary has now touched nearly every area of law where the administration has an interest. Election laws, business regulations, immigration policy, executive privilege, the scope of congressional oversight. In each of these arenas, the pattern is the same. When the courts push back, the judges get targeted. The cumulative effect is the creation of an adversarial relationship between the executive's political network and the judicial branch that goes far beyond normal tensions between the branches. It is a relationship characterized not by disagreement, but by a desire to delegitimize and destroy. The erosion of public trust is the ultimate prize in this conflict. Because trust is the currency of democratic institutions, and when that currency is debased, the institutions become hollow shells. A court that nobody trusts is just a collection of people in robes making pronouncements that nobody feels obligated to follow. And if the executive decides that it doesn't have to follow court orders because the courts are illegitimate, we have crossed the threshold from democratic crisis into something far darker. We are not at that threshold yet, but the direction of travel is deeply concerning. The voices sounding the alarm are not fringe figures. They are mainstream legal scholars, former federal judges, bar association leaders, institutionalists who have spent their lives inside the system and who recognize the smell of structural fire. When these people say the risks to the constitutional framework are serious, they are not being dramatic. They are being restrained. They know how bad this can get because they've studied the places where it has gotten that bad before. The question of what comes next hangs over everything. The path forward is not predetermined. Institutions can be defended. Norms can be rebuilt. But that defense requires recognition of the threat and a willingness to impose costs on those who are carrying out the attacks. If the intimidation campaign continues to face no real pushback, no political consequences, no legal sanctions, then the incentive structure is clear. Attacking judges works. It gets results, it intimidates, it erodes, it destroys. So why would anyone stop? The courtroom chaos we are witnessing is not a temporary glitch. It is a revealing symptom of a deeper sickness, a sickness of the body politic that has infected the relationships between the branches of government. The eruption in that federal courtroom when the manipulation was exposed. It wasn't just about one ruling or one judge. It was the sound of a system under unprecedented strain, a system that is being asked to withstand pressures it was never designed to absorb. How it responds in the coming months will determine whether the judiciary remains a co-equal branch of government or becomes a hollowed-out institution that retains its formal powers but has lost the essential ingredient of its authority. The belief, held by the people and respected by the other branches, that when a judge speaks, the law speaks. Lose that, and we lose something irreplaceable. And right now, we are watching powerful people try to make us lose it, one attack at a time, in full public view, with a coordination and ferocity that would make any defender of democracy's blood run cold.